In this video, we're going to talk about the origins of baptism and its early use. The earliest known religion to practice baptism was the Zoroastrians. Zoroastrianism shares a lot of similarities with Hinduism because they both descended from the same Proto-Indo-Iranian religion. Zoroastrianism settled in Persia and Hinduism settled in India. Zoroaster was a prophet who had these visions of angels or encounters with angels while immersed in water, and obviously in some sort of ecstatic or mystic state. One of the angels is called Vahuman, which means good mind. I bring that up because angelology is very interrelated with baptism. Zoroastrians pray facing towards sources of light like sun or fire, as it represents Ahura Mazda's divine light and energy. They emphasize purification and focus on keeping their body, minds, and environments pure in the quest to defeat evil. Zoroastrianism would be the dominant religion of ancient Babylon when the Jews were situated there. So Judaism had a lot of influence from Zoroastrianism. Obviously for this video, we're talking about baptism and angels. Some of these sects of Judaism would adopt these water purification rituals. Some of them use something called a mikvah, which is like a bath used in immersion ceremonies for cleansing or for preparation in other ceremonies. There was one Gnostic sect of Jewish mystics in particular that would start to develop baptism as we recognize it. This group was called the Essenes, and they would ritually immerse themselves in water every morning. They practiced things like piety and celibacy and abstinence. They didn't own property and they didn't believe in trade, so they were very egalitarian people. They were hermits and pacifists and didn't believe in owning money or property, and they basically dedicated themselves to scriptures and ancient wisdom and recording the secret names of angels. You probably recognize them from the discovery of the Dead Sea Scrolls. That was an Essene library that was found. But the Essenes, they practiced this daily immersion into water, and they mainly focused on mystic experiences and studying scriptures and writing things down. They had a lot of strong eschatological beliefs, which is basically that the world could end at any point. But overall, there's a lot of reference to very Zoroastrian ideas, so they had a lot of influence from Zoroastrianism. The Essenes would produce a prophet called John the Baptist. He was either an Essene himself or he was raised or trained by that sect. But he would venture out and start baptizing. John the Baptist's practice probably went something like this. You take someone out to the water, you lay them back, and then you immerse them into the water. It's quite accurately named immersion baptism. So it happens when you're immersed in water, you're holding your breath, you're facing the bright sun, as well as you have this attitude of expectancy that something's going to happen. On top of this, the water is likely very cold. What will happen is you're activating the vagus nerve, which turns on your parasympathetic nervous system. There are some theories that the ancient form of baptism was to give people near-death experiences. While almost drowning people may have been the case in some ancient Gnostic traditions, I don't think it was necessary, because you could basically induce a near-death-like experience. Basically, when you have parasympathetic activation and you have that attitude of expectancy, which means you're focused on your visual field, you're in a state that could then be pushed further into sleep activation. There are some techniques that could be used to induce a light vision and ecstatic experience. And it's plausible that John the Baptist, because he was famous for baptizing people and developing some of these techniques, he was likely very good at giving people parasympathetic activation and then a light vision. One technique that is occasionally practiced in some traditions still is pressing on the eyeballs while they're immersed. This would send bursts of light into their visual field and cause synchronous activity in their brain and help induce sleep activation. Sleep activation in waking consciousness is basically what meditative trances are, what the hypnotizable state is, what the psychosis state is, what the extreme altered consciousness is. Basically, altered states of consciousness come down to either sympathetic or parasympathetic activation, while sleep activation occurs during waking consciousness. So all this to say that a baptizer who discovers or is skilled at these techniques and timing and procedures and can prepare the recipient well enough, you could have this kind of visual spiritual experience. And considering the tradition, the Gnostic mystics that he came from, he likely was taking advantage of something like that. One religion was actually formed based off of John the Baptist called the Mandeans, and they believe that he was the last and greatest prophet. There's not a lot of literature left that exists from these people, but there are still some Mandeans that are around, and they practice immersion baptism still. One of their books, The Gnostic of John the Baptizer, is all about the visions and dreams and mysticism and astrology and things of that nature. So there's a lot of big influences from Zoroastrianism to the Essenes to early Christianity. They talk about Jesus in the book, though they don't consider him to be a prophet. And John and Jesus even have a conversation about the angel of death, as well as where the fisher and fisher symbolism come from, and that idea of the fisher of souls. Although the Essenes didn't last very long, their teachings or their ideas would have a lot of later influences on Jewish and Christian mysticism and alchemy, things like the Kabbalah and the Merkabah and various practices like that. But they would inspire another Gnostic group shortly after called the Elkesaites. The Elkesaites would practice pretty intense daily immersion baptisms as well. The Elkesaites would produce a prophet named Mani who had visions of an angel. So Mani, by the 3rd century AD in Persia, would begin a religion called Manichaeism. Mani viewed himself in the line of prophets as Adam, Buddha, Zoroaster, and Jesus. Most of the scriptures of Manichaeism are lost, but it was a former world religion. It was very widespread. Missionaries had brought it through the Roman Empire as far as Spain, although it would disappear by the 5th century. And it lasted in Asia until about the 14th century, so it spanned most of from Europe to Asia. Mani basically drew from elements of every other religion at the time, but rather than mere syncretism, it sought the proclamation of a truth that could be translated into diverse forms in accordance with the different cultures into which it spread. Manichaeism was believed to resurrect in the Middle Ages in Europe in the form of the Cathars and the Albigensians and other Gnostic groups like that. For the most part, immersion baptism fell out of practice, although it would occasionally pop back up throughout history. There were probably some instances of infant immersion baptism, and that's probably more so where you would get into like near-death experiences, because it would be much easier to almost drown an infant. But in any case, that would be an example of really dysregulating its nervous system and kind of preparing it or conditioning the infant or the child to be hypnotizable, to be able to enter different states of consciousness. I don't know how often that was practiced in ancient times, probably not very often. But for a normal adult immersion baptism, you would be able to help regulate the parasympathetic nervous system, which helps you instill a sense of community and charity and kind of bring people together. Ritual or communal parasympathetic activation has been studied and shows that people doing this together, their brains synchronize and their heartbeats synchronize and other interesting things like that. Again, as always, this is not to pass judgment on any practice of whether it's good or bad or whether it means this or that. It's simply an exploration of these things. And it seems that there is this physiological process that needs to happen in order to access this stuff. Now, what that stuff means is up for debate. But the baptism ritual and the angelology seem to go hand in hand, which is very interesting. I want to tell a story from when I was a baby. I had apparently crawled off into some body of water. I don't know if it was a pool, a pond, or a lake, but my mother found me after just lying face first in the water, not moving or anything like that. And she said there was just this sort of like weird, sort of angelic kind of mist around me. And for some reason, I hadn't drowned. But the point is, there's a lot of weird phenomena in this world, and all I care about is exploring it. But this is more so on baptism specifically. We'll get into what are angels in a future video. I've found a lot of interesting parallels in Taoist alchemy to angelology, so we'll get into all of that in a future video as it kind of relates to these phosphenes and other extrasensory phenomena. I'm not suggesting that that's all angels are, but that there is some link to that regarding these kind of types of phenomena. Because there's also probable parallels to magnetism and even planetary bodies and celestial bodies. Not too many people take these topics seriously, and especially comparing them around different cultures. So hopefully you guys are fascinated by all of this, and I'll continue to make more on these subjects. But that's it for this video. Thanks for watching.